All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started, everyone. There might be a couple people adding on in the middle of the webinar, and that's perfectly fine. We're going to be doing live webinars throughout the contest season this year. So if you have any questions about upcoming ones, I am going to show a couple dates and the link to where to register and the titles for those future webinars. So please stay tuned for that. As a reminder, participants attending this webinar are welcome to submit questions, and we are recording. So on the right-hand side of the webinar, you will see that there's a chat box. And if you can't see that, there is a small orange arrow you can click and it will drop down the chat box. So if you're having difficulties with that, feel free to either send me an email or there is a customer service number that I can forward to you. Also, if you're unable to submit questions or would like to contact me after the webinar, please do that. My email and phone number are on the screen. All right, so tonight we're going to be talking about theme, topics, and how to get started on your research. So the 2019 theme, if you haven't heard it yet, is Triumph and Tragedy in History. We're going to talk about how to select a powerful topic, and we're going to dive into primary, secondary sources, historical significance, and historical context. There might be a couple polls, and please make sure to ask a lot of questions. This is a great opportunity if you have any questions that you didn't get covered in class, or if you want to talk about something a little bit more in-depthly, please feel free to submit questions. All right, so let's go ahead and get started in talking about this theme. So triumph and tragedy in history. But before we start diving into how to connect to it, I want to focus on the two theme words. So let's start with triumph. So let's take a few minutes and either jot down or think to yourself, what does the word triumph mean to me? When we look up triumph in the dictionary, it's referred to as the act, fact, or condition of being victorious, triumphant, victory, conquest. It's a significant success or noteworthy achievement, occasion of victory, resulting from victory or joy over success. As a verb, to gain a victory, to be victorious, to win, to gain mastery, to prevail. Let's focus on the word tragedy. What does the word tragedy make you think of? So you can either jot down the synonyms in or just think about them in your mind or historical events that pop up. When we look up tragedy, dreadful, fatal event, disaster, dramatic composition, usually dealing with a serious or somber theme. So with these two theme words and the theme itself, I want you to keep a couple things in mind for this year. So the National Office has declared that students are not required to use both theme words in their project, but we do want to encourage you to make connections. This year's theme is not technically balanced. A lot of topics you're going to find are not always going to be 50-50%. So not all topics you're going to be looking for are going to have a strong connection to both triumph and tragedy. And we want you to keep in mind that perspective and point of view matters in every topic you're looking into. So I want to take a minute and go through a couple examples that you might be able to see with a couple topics, or if you're having trouble thinking of what angle you want to approach this topic or this theme this year. So the first one I want to talk about is triumph and tragedy can be held together by a central idea. So of course, I made a couple connections to Iowa-specific topics, but let's look at Alexander G. Clark of Muscatine, Iowa. So Alexander Clark from Muscatine was a successful businessman, lawyer, editor, and speaker. And in 1980 was actually appointed by President Benjamin Harrison to be the Minister and Consul General to Liberia. In 1867, when the Muscatine School District said Clark's daughter, Susan, who at age 12 couldn't attend the same public school, Clark decided to school the school district and won in the Iowa Supreme Court. So we're looking at the tragedy of his daughter being denied the right to attend public school and the triumph of Clark winning in the Iowa Supreme Court. And I want you to keep in mind that this is actually prior to Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. So I'm always going to find some great Iowa connections, but that's one way that you can look at the topic is one T flowing into another T. So this one would be a tragedy resulting in a triumph, but you could certainly look at it as a triumph resulting into a tragedy. So the next way I want to look at this is T over T, triumph and tragedy occurring at the same time. So the Iowa story I wanted to talk about here is Governor Robert D. Ray. Governor Ray served as the 38th governor of Iowa from January 16th, 1969 to January 14th, 1983. During his term, Governor Ray agreed to bring Southeast Asian Tai Dam refugees to the United States by creating his own refugee resettlement program. Opinion polls from the time period demonstrated Ray's refugee resettlement and relief efforts were very controversial within the state. Many Iowans feared competition for jobs and diversion of funds from Native Iowans. So although Ray's humanitarian act was a triumph, he was faced with the tragedy of many angry Iowans who did not approve of his decision. So this is one person facing both a triumph and a tragedy at the same time. And as you can see here on the right side of the screen, there's actually a very angry letter from an Iowan. And this is actually from the State Historical Society of Iowa's collection. So the last way I want to look at this theme is one theme word stronger than another theme word. So focusing on just one of the theme words. So like I mentioned, the National Office says it is okay for students to just select one of the T's. So I wanted to focus here on Jack Trice, and I'm sure many students have either heard of Jack Trice or know where that name comes from. A great example, Jack Trice was the football player who became the first African-American athlete for Iowa State College, which is now referred to as Iowa State University. So his triumph in being the very first African-American to play for the Iowa State College football team. But like I mentioned, looking for connections within the theme words, not all topics are going to have a connection to both T's, but some of them certainly might have a small connection. Unfortunately, with Jack Trice, there is a connection to tragedy. In 1923, Jack Trice was killed in his second game for Iowa State. So as always, when you're looking at topics, try to take a peek if there is a connection to the second T, but if you have to force it or it feels awkward when doing so, feel free to step away from that and not do that. So don't force it, but certainly try. So a couple questions I want you to consider when looking at topics or trying to figure out if the topic you've selected is strong enough. There's a couple ways that you can see what angle you want to go towards. So can one person's triumph be another person's tragedy? Can a person, group, suffer from both a tragedy and triumph from a single event? How does one ultimately triumph after a tragedy? Can a triumph lead to a tragedy? So those are four great questions you can ask yourself when exploring a topic idea. So I want to take a minute and see if anyone has any questions about either topic selection, how to pick a topic. Maybe you have a topic that you're not sure is strong enough. I just want to take a few minutes if anyone has any questions for me. And if you don't, that's perfectly fine. Like I said, my email will be at the end of this webinar as well. You can also find me on the National History Day in Iowa website. You can get a hold of me there, and I'm always available by phone. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me for some assistance. All right, so let's start talking about topic selection. So the annual theme is designed to give students a lot of leeway. Students can select any topic that they want. It can be local Iowa history, it can be national, or it can be a world-focused topic. Once the topic is selected, students need to justify how their topic fits into the annual theme, or for this year, triumph and tragedy in history. And they must demonstrate the historical significance, or what I like to say, you need to demonstrate why this topic is important for us to learn about. So where can you find topics? Well, I first want you to think about what are your interests? What are some things you're passionate about? Are there any specific hobbies like sports or science or history? Talk to your social studies teacher. I know many social studies teachers that have specific topics that are their favorite, and you never know, you might hear of a new topic you haven't heard before from your teacher. Check out the National History Day in Iowa topic list. We do have the list of Iowa topics out. If you visit the National History Day in Iowa webpage, you can certainly download that, and it has links to our primary source sets. So it'll give you some great primary resources in our collection to take a peek at the story. Explore the National History Day theme book with topic lists. You can find this on the official National History Day page. They do have the theme book out, and it has a great list of national and world-focused topics. But before you actually confirm what your topic is, I want you to ask yourself a couple questions. So before you start digging into research, make sure you can answer these questions. Am I passionate about this topic? Can I see myself spending months reading, writing, and reviewing research on this topic? I want students to be excited about the work that they're doing. And if you're not excited, you might not be eager to go to the library or to sit on the computer and type up your thesis statement. So keep in mind, if you're not too excited about the topic, see if there's something else that you're way more passionate about. Are there enough resources to conduct an analysis on this topic? So I always advise students to start with secondary sources such as the internet or classroom textbooks or even their teachers to get a grasp on the topic, so get some context and some background information before you start digging deep into research, just to see if it's the right fit for you, and if there's enough resources at your disposal. So for example, let's say you're really interested in the triumph and tragedy of the Norman invasion. So when Vikings landed in Ireland, starting around 795 AD. Take a peek and see if there's enough information on this topic for you to provide an in-depth analysis. Are there enough reliable primary resources that you can see? If not, it may not be a strong topic for you, or you may have to really consider what category you want to do. And the last one, does my topic fit into the theme of triumph and tragedy in history, and can I prove it? So the goal of History Day is to find a topic, develop an argument or a claim as to why your topic fits into the theme, and your research should defend that claim. So you want to make sure that you have a strong topic that you can make the claim that it fits into triumph and tragedy, and you want to have enough research to defend it, to show those judges why your topic fits into triumph and tragedy in history. Does anyone have any questions about how to make that connection to the theme? A lot of times people have great connections to their passion, or they have a topic they're really excited about, but they need help narrowing it down. I'm more than happy to help with that as well. And that's important to do that narrowing down right now in the fall before you start doing some great research. All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and move along. And just as a reminder, on the right side of your screen, there should be a control panel. And up in that, when you're looking at the control panel, there's going to be a small orange arrow in that left-hand side. You can click on that, and it will drop down a box that says questions, and you can submit questions there. All right, we're going to go ahead and move forward. How do I start researching? I've got my topic, and now I'm going to start the process of researching. So I like to advise students, first thing you need to do is pull a strategy together. So you have your topic. First, you need to find sources. So start finding your information. We're going to be looking at primary and secondary sources, and we're going to go over what those are here in a few minutes. You want to develop and try to answer specific research questions to help support that claim as to why your topic fits into the theme. The second part of your strategy, you want to determine the way to organize your information. So how to keep track of your notes and your sources. If you have a source tracker or an Excel spreadsheet that you can put in what source you're looking at, what was in the source, and the citation, that's awesome for you to keep track of, so that at the end of the project, when you have to build the annotated bibliography, all of your sources are right there. Or Google Docs are really successful. A lot of classrooms and a lot of teachers suggest using Google Docs, especially if you're in a group project. That's one way that you can all share a Google Doc and kind of pour out that information into the same shared doc for you guys to review. So it's important to build a strategy at the beginning of the contest season. You want to go in with a plan. Finding those sources. So let's talk a little bit about where you can start finding sources. Once you've collected the basic information of sources on your topic, so you want to take your research to that next level, college libraries are a great resource for you. They're a little bit larger than your school library. They have a wider variety of books, of primary sources, such as old newspapers on microfilm that you can use, or there's copies that you can possibly make there. There's also a lot of great individual resources, such as librarians or maybe mentors from college students that can help you on the computers. I know that college librarians love National History Day, and they love helping out students. Also, your local libraries are going to be a great network for you. It may have a lot, if you're doing a local topic, there may be even some great local resources for you. Historical societies and museum libraries and archives. If your topic specifically is on Iowa history, our State Historical Society of Iowa would be great help. The state and local historical societies specialize in collecting information about Iowa and local communities. So in addition to state resources, the Historical Society has many interesting primary sources on national topics. So I always say, if you're looking at a national topic, take a peek and see if there's a connection to an Iowa story. There just might be. There's some great stories right here in your backyard. Interviews. Interviews are not required for a History Day project. A lot of students like to conduct interviews. That's perfectly fine. If your topic's recent enough to include people who are still alive and can provide informed opinions, you may want to conduct the interview. Or there's some great professors who specialize in certain topics, local historians who would be more than happy to give you some information. The internet is also a great way to do some preliminary work on your topic, but please make sure it's not the only source you use. In addition, many historical societies and universities are digitizing collections of primary source material and making them available online. I've also pinpointed Wikipedia on here because I've seen this a lot the past couple years. And I just want to note, I advise students to use this site as a secondary resource only. It's a great way for you to kind of get some background information on your topic, kind of get a feel for what it is. But we want you to dig deeper. So I would highly suggest not using Wikipedia for your research. But if you want to use it as a secondary just to get a glimpse of what your topic is, that's perfectly fine. All right, so I want to go over primary, secondary sources so we all have a great understanding when we're looking for resources what these two pieces mean. So primary resources provides a first-hand account about a person or an event. It's usually written or produced at the time of that event. So I want everyone to take a few minutes and just think, what would be a first-hand account? All right, secondary sources. Sourced by an author who was not an eyewitness or a participant in the historical event or period. So also want you to take a few minutes and just think what would be a great secondary source. And if you're listening, I've already mentioned a couple. So this is someone who was not an eyewitness. All right, so some examples of a primary resource. So these are letters, speeches, diaries, newspaper articles from the time period, documents, photographs, or artifacts. So like we mentioned, if you're looking at college or universities or your historical societies, there's going to be a lot of letters, diaries, newspaper articles that are digitized for you to take a peek at. Also ask them about photographs. Those are great primary visuals to put in your project. Secondary resources. So some great examples of secondary resources would be school textbooks. Those are available to you right at school. Biographies or encyclopedias. So I would suggest when you first get your topic and you want to figure out which direction you want to go, take a peek at encyclopedias. Dig into those secondary resources and start getting some context. So it also applies to descriptive articles or information found on the internet. So like we mentioned, the internet is a great place to look for secondary information, but please be careful by using sites like Wikipedia. All right, I also want to touch base on historical significance and historical context. So this is a very important part of your research and a part of those research questions you're going to develop because you need to be able to discuss both of these areas. So historical significance is understanding a topic's development over time and its influence. So like I said, what was the impact, short-term and long-term, and why should we learn about this topic? So we're going to go over what short-term and long-term impact is. But the main thing I want you to remember with significance is why should we learn about this topic? As you're doing your research, I want you to find proof as to why it's important to learn about. What made its impact? Historical context, the appropriate setting in which to understand the subject's time period. So the setting might include economic, intellectual, and/or social culture characteristics of the place and time. Background information. So we want you to be the teacher. So when I talk about historical context, I usually sell it to students to say, put the judge in that time period. We want you to give background information to explain to the judge what's happening in that time period that your topic's taking place. So pretend like your judge has no idea what your topic is about. They've never heard of it before. They have no idea what its impact is. First, you have to describe a little bit of the background information, which then shows them why it made the impact that it did. So developing research questions. So I've got these two examples here, and it really depends on the kind of topic that you have. But as you start looking through sources, you're going to develop research questions that you want to answer. So one of the first things I want you to think about are what were the events, issues, or social norms that influenced my topic? So this is really in that background information. So even when we look at women's suffrage movement, what's happening in the early 1900s? What are the social norms that influenced the women's suffrage movement? You have to explain why the fight for the vote was so important to that time period and to those women and how it impacts us today. So, number two, what was the short term impact my topic had on the economic, social, political, and cultural climate of the time period? And what was the long term? So, once that initial fight for the vote, what was that short term impact? Was there a shock? How did the community respond? How did the government respond? You need to prove the historical significance, show why it's important. So I like to use the example of throwing a rock into the water. So that short-term impact is that first splash. So that first reaction to the topic. So when they've declared that they want to start protesting for the right to vote, it's that first shock. Long-term impact. So the ripples that you see in the water, how it's affected over time. How did the women's suffrage movement affect over time? How does it affect us today? Are we still impacted by the right to vote? All right, does anyone have any questions about the research process for me? And I would be more than happy if anyone has any questions on how to get started or how to contact colleges, universities, historical societies, or local libraries. We're more than happy to help you to get in contact with those organizations. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're more than happy to get you a contact. And also, depending on your topic, we're also happy to look and see if there are any professors that would be happy to do an interview, or if we know of any local historians that might have some great background research for you. All right, so I also just want to make sure everyone's aware of the upcoming webinars. So our next webinar is December 5th on how to write a History Day thesis. So we're going to go more in depthly on how to start the thesis statement, how it evolves over time, and why it's important to your research and to your project. And as you can see here, the one after that is December 12th. We have one on January 9th, January 31st, April 8th, and May 6th. So please make sure if you have questions on how to get signed up, or if you're unable to attend but have questions for me, please feel free to contact me, and you can sign up on the National History Day in Iowa Workshops and Assistance page. And this link will also be in the email that we send out after this webinar. Well, thank you so much, everyone, and we hope to see you on December 5th.